I'm Luke Harris, and I'm joined on the screen by Mirko Kagura and Anthony Flapper. Gentlemen, how are you both?
Very good, Luke.
Luke, it sounds like that romper room or something, you know, when they used to do the intro.
Look, I do feel a touch of romper room. Last night, I had a ball. I went out to Crown Casino last night. We went to a thing at the Palms. Bjorn again was playing. It was a cracking evening. So if you get a chance to go watch Bjorn again and you want 2.5 hours of great entertainment, it was a lot of fun. And I must admit, I've got to give a lot of credit. There was a lot of people in their mid-50s, mid-60s, some in their 70s, and they were boogieing away through the night, which was all good fun.
There'll be a few replacement hips on the way.
Actually, I reckon I was one of the rare few ones without a replacement hip or a knee. So I'll take that. I'll take that. But it has been a big week this week, Mirko. Markets have rebounded on the back of last week's shenanigans. You want to give us a bit of an update?
Yeah, look, markets certainly rebounded off the back of last week, which was a bit of a mystery because everyone was sort of waiting on Nvidia to report and the like. They reported, they actually did well. Market still didn't like it for some strange reason because I think the one corner of calling the AI bubble was louder than the one saying, but there's revenue to justify it. Look, as a result, market has sort of taken a bit of a deep breath. A little bit difficult to gauge the US this week because they had Thanksgiving overnight. Big day in the US. So they've only had 3 days of trading, but in the 3 days of trading that they have had, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the S&P 500's up 3%, and the Nasdaq is up 4%. So I suppose again, it's just a bit of an illustration as to how quickly the market can move in both directions, and jumping at shadows and making decisions on the fly. Very, very dangerous because a lot can happen while you're sitting on the sideline there. In Australia, it's also been a bit of a green week as well. I'm just having a look at today's market. So we've been open for an hour and a half and we're up 0.1%. So for the week, the All Ords is up 2.67%. I would say that we're a little bit subdued because of the inflation data point that came out in Australia this week, showing that inflation was not going away anytime soon. And all of a sudden, the market is sort of pushing out potential rate cuts even further, which markets don't like, as we know.
No, definitely. So I guess in summation of all that is last week was all about emotion and this week's about the fundamentals. Is that about right?
I'd say so. Yeah. Follow the fundamentals, follow the actual cash, and you can't go too far wrong.
No, absolutely. And Anthony, this week we saw the data coming out from the Reserve Bank and so on. We saw that inflation rate had actually spiked a little bit, and the chances of an interest rate cut have probably fallen by the wayside. And there's even some discussions there that interest rates could actually go the other way come mid-year from that point of view. From your perspective, you deal with a lot of clients on a day-to-day basis. You speak to a lot of businesses on a day-to-day basis. What are you hearing on the ground, mate? Are businesses reporting good conditions? Are they reporting difficult conditions? What are they saying about price rises? Is cost of living real in that space?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. I think cost of living is definitely real. I think you're talking to the average Joe on the street. There's definitely the cost to live is increasing. There's no doubt about that. Talking to some clients during the week and talking to a real estate agent last week, there is definitely the fact that interest rates were not coming off. I think has slowed the property market, particularly commercially. It is not as buoyant as you would have expected with the rate cut, and I think people are just sitting tight and probably parking in cash for the time being, unsure of where this is all going to land. And I think there's probably a level of, talking to a few clients, there's a level of concern around Trump and what he's doing, etc., that flows back to Australia in some form or fashion. But in terms of business, look, if you're in niche, it's not if you're in a niche business and effectively you got your fundamentals right, and you're not spending large and effectively trying to run lean and make money, you will. But it's not a time where you want to be going out and spending a lot of money on capital, increasing in terms of staffing levels, etc., and resources internally, because it is getting harder. So it's a case of beware. More, not so much beware, but just be mindful. It's not a time where you're going to be making loads of money, I think.
Yeah,
in your SMEs.
I think that's a good call there. And speaking to, I had the fortune of being away early on in the week. So I was up on the Gold Coast on Monday and in Brisbane on Tuesday, and speaking to people over there as well, they're also reporting similar type conditions. That being said, there was probably a greater sense of buoyancy up there because there's a lot of activity occurring on the back of the Olympics, a lot of construction work and so on. So you can see things moving along from that perspective. But when you actually delve down a little bit, you could see certain businesses were doing really, really well, and then other businesses weren't doing so well. So I think you're right. I think your description of niche is right. Where the challenge, I think, sits, and this is probably a precursor for the housing market in the sense that, cost of living is rising, housing costs are up, food, beverages, electricity costs, all these sorts of things from that point of view. And that's really stymieing people's capacity to go out and do other things from that end. And I think when people are struggling from that point of view and interest rates are also remaining expensive, it puts a lot of pressure in terms of where housing prices can go and whether or not housing prices can continue to rise. Interestingly, I have noticed, I'm not sure if you two gentlemen have noticed, is properties are appearing a lot longer on the market. They're not selling as quickly as they perhaps were in the past. And those prices of, we're getting $100,000 or $200,000 above reserve probably aren't being promoted anywhere near what they were being promoted probably 12, 18 months ago. Is that a fair observation?
Yeah, I would say my experience looking at what's happening at auctions has certainly been people with hands in the pocket and waiting to see what plays out and sort of waiting to sort of understand what the true value of the property is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other issue there too is we're starting to see supply and demand get a lot closer, whereas before demand was always outstripping supply, hence the reason why prices were always going up. Today, when the supply factors are actually catching up, as we've seen in the Peninsula as an example, or on the other side of the coast around Lorne, Anglesey Way and all that kind of stuff, where supply factors are now well and truly available, price points are coming down from that perspective. So it is definitely an interesting market from that end, and I think there's a challenge there. I think there's a challenge there for the Reserve Bank in terms of if it goes too hard on interest rates from that point of view, it could cause a lot of untold damage. And so I think what we might see early in the new year, this is just an observation, what we might see is a lot of sitting on our hands from the policymakers themselves rather than making a call one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that's right, Luke. I think particularly in Victoria, and we've spoken about it before in terms of the on costs in terms of holding property, particularly if it's not your primary residence. The return's not there. If you're not getting capital growth on these properties, which in areas where it's been flat or negative, the rental return yields are just not there. So You're not going to have someone go and fork out $1 million to effectively generate a 4% return when you can put it into a TD at the same rate. So,
absolutely.
It's just not that appeal. So hence why a lot of property, in particular, I see that across the commercial space, it just doesn't make a lot of sense at the moment because the rental yields are so low.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, look, thanks for your input on that one, gentlemen. One thing I want to talk about is Australia's changing workforce. There was an interesting article today in the Murdoch press where they were talking about Australia now has 5 generations of workforce, teenagers working alongside with people in their 70s and 80s. Now, in fairness, Bunnings is the poster child for this sort of arrangement, but it is happening elsewhere, So, and I do love going into Bunnings. You go into the paint section, and you've got a 16-year-old and a 70-year-old serving, and you're kind of going, I might go to the 70-year-old. I reckon he may know a bit more about paint than the 16-year-old, but that's a separate issue. But the fact that we've got 5 generations working, what it's pointing to is that the average retirement age now in Australia, or what we're seeing, where people voluntarily walk away from the workforce is about 63.8. And this has been creeping up. And I guess it raises the questions, and I'm just interested in the two of you in terms of your thoughts. How many older Australians are working because they want to, or how many are working because they cannot afford not to be working? So what's your thoughts on this, given where we are in today's economic cycle?
Look, I personally, we have a saying, and when we're working with people that are considering retirement, accumulators approaching retirement and discussing what retirement might look like, what continuing to work looks like. And one of the things that we love to sort of use the analogy of, it's a big difference between going to work because you have to versus going to work because you choose to. I have a sense that there's a lot of people, that are pushing that 63.8 because they have to, right? And, you think about legislatively, we've pushed out the age pension now to 67. Preservation age for superannuation is now 60. I'm not surprised that people are continuing to work a little bit longer. And the reality of the matter is that, as you guys were talking about before, the cost of living is extraordinary. So for someone to pick up a couple $100 a week extra means a hell of a lot to those households.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the other thing to factor in is, particularly when you get to retirement, and you're right, and depending on the type of role that you're in, it's a case of what are you going to do in retirement? So for those that they might have their spouse still working, are they going to sit at home in front of the television and there's only so much gardening they can do, and they can get bored easily? So we've seen plenty of cases where effectively they retire, 12, 18 months, 2 years later, they're going, I'm bored out of my brains. It's not good for my health, and they effectively want to go back and do something. And that might be on a part-time basis, but that's what we're seeing a lot of also.
Yeah, and just following on from that, I think we are living longer too, Anthony. So because we're living longer, all of a sudden you may have set aside enough monies for 10 or 15 years, and all of a sudden you're kind of going, well, your statistical life expectancy, all going well, could be 85, could be 90. From that point of view, there's also the other concept, I guess, from that point of view is, previously we had to fund for our retirement and that was it. But now we're actually not having to fund just for our retirement, but potentially there could be a future into aged care. And what does that look like from that point of view? Then there's also the younger generation, i.e. the sandwich that we're kind of invested in at this moment in time, where we have these young kids coming through. And that generation is probably doing a little bit tougher in terms of school costs, house costs and all that kind of stuff, and mums and dads wanting to make a contribution there. So I think all these factors combined are creating this perfect storm. I do think cost of living is playing a massive part, but I think those other factors probably are probably the main drivers as to why people might be working that little bit longer. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the other thing too is that you think about, you go back a few years and people working from home in COVID, it was not a nice time. So now that a lot of these people potentially back into the workforce, they're liking the communication, they're liking being around other people. You retire and you're sitting at home with the missus. It could be similar to COVID.
Be careful what you say next, Anthony. You already said it. Well done.
Anthony, we both know Cheryl, and we'd be very careful if I was you, mate. So, not going there, mate. Not going there.
Well, I feel very old as a result of this discussion, because I was just doing the arithmetic of my time at Innate Wealth, and it involves my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, and my 50s. God help me. It's been a while.
Mate, I look forward to welcoming your 60s, my friend. And you're not that far away, buddy.
And I suspect that 63.8 is less than double digits for you, Mick.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you very much. That's right.
Fair point too. Gentlemen, we finally had some good news in relation to Victoria. So Victoria, the worst for business label, which has been running around doing the scenes, and everyone's out there selling it, and particularly interstate. So
is that the good news, Luke?
Well, that is the good news, because we've had the Mike Cannon-Brooks from Atlassian has come out and said, actually, this whole concept about Victoria being a really bad place to be and a bad place to invest, and from a corporate perspective, is actually not true. And he's saying that based upon Atlassian's experience and based upon what they're doing, and they've made a significant investment into Victoria, they're actually saying that the conditions in Victoria are actually really good, and that the policy settings are actually really good, and that there is a disconnect between what is the narrative and what is reality. Now, I will say I went to Brisbane, as I said earlier in the week, and I was speaking to a person in Brisbane, and he goes, "Oh, look, where you from?" I said, "Oh, I'm from Melbourne." And he said, "My commiserations. I'm sorry to hear that." So there is this general narrative around the country that everyone in Victoria is obviously the poorer cousin, given what we've gone through over the last few years. Given what Mike Cannon-Brookes is suggesting, is there some truth to the fact that what the narrative is versus what the reality is? Is there some truth to that statement?
My take on this, Mike, is thank you for your commentary. Thank you for leasing out 1,900 square metres of space in Melbourne where your staff occasionally come into the office. But you are in a sweet spot, mate, and you are certainly in the right sector to be saying things are going okay. There is a reason that the headline was that Victoria ranked dead last as far as doing business is concerned, is because we don't make it easy on people here. That's a fact. Our payroll taxes, our land taxes, onerous sort of licensing requirements that we have. The bureaucracy, it's not flash. That's my take.
Ouch.
Yeah, I can't add much to that other than maybe Mike Cannon-Brookes should change his career and move into Victorian politics.
Well, that would be nice.
Actually, I'd vote for him. Let me tell you. Look. The fact of the matter is, and I think this is probably a good thing. If the narrative is that we are terrible and that we are dead last and if things are struggling, it may actually mean that the policy makers out there actually go in there and try and fix the mess. And if they do fix the right things, then that could actually be a turning point. So there is a bit of a bonus in all this. But I hear what you're saying, Mick, in the sense that Mike Cannon-Brookes sitting in a pretty privileged position in terms of the industry that he plays in, and the scope that he plays in and the kind of role that he plays in. So it's very easy for him to turn around and say that sort of environment works. Whereas I think if you're speaking to the rank and file out there who are dealing in Victoria on a day-to-day basis, the sense of frustration is pretty real. Mind you, I will say that this week I think we've got a fairly exciting weekend coming up. We're opening up all the railway stations, or the suburban loops opening up, I believe, this weekend. And I believe is that tunnel opening up this weekend too? It's a fairly big weekend for infrastructure projects in Victoria, I believe.
There was some ribbon cutting.
There will be. Now, on another point that I'd like to probably have a quick chat about, we've had the Ukraine and Russia peace deal this week, or another attempt, Mark 7, Mark 10, Mark 15 of it, I guess, from that point of view. And pretty much the Trump administration has been pitching a breakthrough. I guess a bit of the problem is they forgot to invite Ukraine into the discussion on that piece. So there was a bit of an issue there. And I think a lot of this is Trump's under a lot of pressure in the United States on cost of living, on particular documentation which is not being released and the like from that point of view. And every time that seems to happen, he seems to throw out a distraction. And Ukraine seems to be that distraction at the moment. I guess the only concern that I kind of sit there is we look at what Trump's proposing here, and part of the strategy was that what they're actually suggesting is that Ukraine would give up all this land that Russia has illegally taken from them, and they would just accept that. Is there any chance that this thing could go through, or is this just another Fugazi, which Trump likes to do, and we're going to be back here in 6 months' time with another similar type problem?
This is a bit like...
Be careful what you say, gentlemen.
Yeah, I know. This is a bit like being booked in for open heart surgery. Surgeon's ready to go, scrubbed up, got all the assistants ready to go, and the patient's not there. This is, who are you negotiating deals for if they're not involved? And, the fact that someone apart from a country in question can make decisions around, territories, really? Yeah, so I don't know that this is going anywhere, to be perfectly frank.
The only person that could ever think that this is going to work is Trump. and potentially the other gentleman involved. But I think Mick's right. You can't make a deal when the other party's not involved. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit crazy in the sense that you'd want now. Credit to wanting him to, or credit to him for wanting to come up with a peace arrangement. Credit to him for putting it back on the agenda and so on. But the reality there's three parties involved here. We've got Russia, we've got Ukraine. Clearly, they're the two parties mainly involved. But there's also Europe, because the reality here is whatever Trump determines that can happen to Ukraine, and if he goes very easy or very soft on somebody like a Putin, that really opens up the door for the rest of Europe by definition, in terms of what Russia could then do to the other areas. And, it might start with Georgia, it might start with Azerbaijan, it might start with whatever from that point of view, and could work its way into Poland, Finland, and the like. Europe has a history of this happening. 2 world wars there, if I remember, in the last century. So we want to kind of avoid these sorts of issues. And I just don't think when Trump comes up with these harebrained ideas, or his administration comes up with these harebrained ideas, because I don't think it's Trump in isolation, you just can't exclude the main actors in this thing. It just doesn't work. And I think part of my concern is, given the pressures that he's under at a domestic level, part of my concern is I think he does this as a distraction to remove that away from the press. And I don't think that is good politics, nor do I think that is good leadership either. And I think that places the world at a higher risk. So that's just my little view, I guess, from that point of view. Anything to add from your end, boys?
It's all in the sales pitch, guys. Depends on how you market the outcomes. Hey, you can get any result you want.
No, fair enough too. Now, what have we got planned this weekend? It's a fairly quiet weekend. We're heading into summer over the weekend. Is that right?
Apparently so. Monday. Monday's official the 1st, isn't it?
It is. And we've had such a cracking spring. It's been amazing. Like, I just don't know what to do with all the sunshine.
I was going to mow the lawn, but I've been told we're getting a truckload of rain, so I could be off the hook, which probably means I'll be doing it at 8 o'clock Tuesday night or something.
One of those beautiful things. And what about you, Ant? Are you on the greens?
Yes, tonight and tomorrow. So double header this weekend. Big weekend.
Oh, and you're playing somebody decent tonight and tomorrow, or what's going on?
They're all decent teams. You can't. They're all high quality. Sunday will be rest day.
We hear other words in the office when you're walking around, so we just. I like the fact that you've gone very diplomatic on the screen.
You just never know who listens in.
Fair enough, too, my friend. Fair enough, too. But you will win, no doubt. Yeah.
We will be trying.
Good to hear. And do we have any other plans outside of sporting events and mowing the lawn? Anything on the agenda, or just a nice quiet weekend for you both?
Pretty quiet.
Outside of bowls, it'll be not much. Sunday will be rest day.
Oh, beautiful. Well, you know what? Enjoy the weekend. If you can get a weekend off just before Christmas, and you don't have to have too much on the agenda, that is always a joy. So just enjoy that. To all our wonderful clients out there, thank you as always for joining us for this week's Weekly Wrap. To the Innate team, thank you as well for all the work that you do. And until we chat again, see you all next week. Cheers, guys.
See you guys.